Greetings everyone, welcome to Commerce Classes. Today we will be understanding Garner versus Murray's ruling regarding the accounting for insolvency of a partner in dissolution of a firm. Now before we take up the ruling and its working, let us again go through the insolvency and its relevance in the accounts of the firm. You see, insolvency of a partner is relevant while doing the accounting work when the partner has a liability towards the firm, that is, he is to bring money into the firm and he doesn't have sufficient funds to bring that amount. Then only we need to account for the insolvency. So these two conditions needs to be satisfied. Like take the case of A. Suppose A is having, say, capital balance of 50,000 and he's having share in reserve 10,000. Maybe he is having a share in realization loss of, say, 32,000. So 28,000 is the balance. Now this is the balance which firm is supposed to pay him because his capital claim is more, right? So in this case, whether A is solvent or insolvent in his personal capacity, that is irrelevant to us, because in the books of firm he doesn't need to bring anything, right? So firm is to pay to him. So insolvency is not relevant here. But so this first condition is not satisfied, so we will not work for his insolvency. If your question says A is insolvent, it doesn't matter, because in the books of firm it's not needed. Now take the case of B. Suppose he is having capital balance of, say, 5,000, he has share in reserve of, say, 10,000, and he also shared realization loss of, say, 32,000, which means that 17,000 is coming on the credit side, so he needs to bring this amount, right? Now if B is insolvent and he doesn't have sufficient assets, then this is relevant to us. Reason is that he is to bring the money and we cannot close our eyes and directly write bank account 17,000, he pays us. If his private or personal position is that his personal assets are of, say, 20,000 and his personal liabilities are of, say, 15,000, it means he just has 5,000 spare with him. So he can only pay 5,000 towards firm. He cannot pay the remaining balance. So now his insolvency is material to us. So in any given examination problem, we'll have to first establish whether we need to account for this or not. So you need to satisfy these two conditions. So B's insolvency is material, we'll account for him. A's insolvency, even if it is there, it is not material to us. Now in insolvency gives rise to capital loss, as we have studied in the previous introductory video on insolvency. Since he cannot bring full amount, he can only bring 5,000, we can write only 5,000. So to balance his account, we need to put 12,000 in some place. So this is a loss. It's a capital loss arising because of insolvency, because the firm cannot get 17,000 from him, firm can get only 5,000. So the amount that we cannot get is a loss to the firm, or capital loss. So while doing the accounting for insolvency of a partner, we have the consequences of insolvency, capital loss, that is the amount that he cannot bring. So the main question is, who is going to bear this loss and in what way? So if the partners have foreseen such losses in future, like there might be a case of insolvency and how to deal with that. So sometimes you have provision in the partnership deed, and for you partnership deed is your question. That is, if your question is specifying that any capital losses arising due to insolvency shall be borne by so and so partner in so and so ratio, that is, something is given, then follow that ruling. So whatever rule is given, follow that rule. However, the problem is when there is no provision in the partnership deed, that is, partners have not decided anything about this. Now question arises how to adjust this loss. So you see, there is nothing given in the Partnership Act directly regarding the capital loss on insolvency, and when nothing is given in our laws, we always look up to the British laws. So there was a very famous case of Garner versus Murray. And in that case, ruling was given regarding the distribution of this capital loss arising on account of insolvency of a partner. Okay, so in our questions, what we need to do is that if any specific ratio is mentioned in the question, We need to follow that. If nothing is given, then we follow Garner versus Murray's ruling. So this is how Garner versus Murray's ruling came into this insolvency problem. Now what is this ruling? Let us go through that. Before that, we will be just looking at the problem. Now our problem is that when a partner has become insolvent, he cannot bring full amount. Like here in this case, if we see the final scenario, B is to bring 2000, C is to bring 5000, and A will get 10,000. So there is no problem here for A, because A is to get money. So whether he is solvent or not solvent, this is immaterial. So we won't even look at him. He is not relevant for insolvency scenario. We'll have to look for B and C. Now B's position is that his assets are 10,000, liabilities are 9,500, which means his assets, private assets, are to be used for his personal liabilities first, and after that you get a balance of 500 only. But he is to bring 2000, which means he cannot bring this amount. At the most he can bring 500. Okay, so he is insolvent, and we have a capital loss of how much? 1500, the amount that he cannot bring. Looking at C, C's position is that he is having, say, yes, he is having 6,000 rupees with him. After paying his personal liabilities, he is to bring 5,000. He can do this. So you see how this insolvency affects our questions. It is only at the time of final settlement that when a partner is to bring money, we cannot just write that he will bring money, which we were doing in simple problems. Because of insolvency, he might not be in a position to bring full amount. So whatever amount he cannot bring is referred as capital loss. Since this is a loss of B, so it must be shared by A and C. The only question is in what ratio, how should this be distributed. So as I stated earlier, if something is there in partnership deed in our questions, we will follow that. Otherwise, we will have to look for Garner versus Murray's. Now this ruling was there in this case. See, there were three partners in this case basically. One was Garner, another was Murray, and another third partner was Wilson. Now at the time of dissolution, Wilson became insolvent and he could not bring full amount. So there was a capital loss in Wilson's account. He was not able to bring the amount. Now this loss is to be borne by the remaining two partners. So Garner stated that let it be distributed in P&L ratio, because we distribute all profits losses in this ratio. But Murray stated that let it be in the capital ratio because it's a capital loss. So now the partners could not settle the matter. So because in P&L ratio, if you distribute this loss, then whosoever is having higher ratio in the profits, he will be bearing more loss. And if you distribute it in capital ratio, then the one who is having more capital shall have to bear the loss, maximum loss. So how to settle the score? So for that matter, they went to the court of law, and in the court it was decided that in the absence of any agreement, the deficiency in the insolvent partner's capital account, that is capital loss, it must be borne by the remaining solvent partner. So who is going to bear it? Remaining solvent partner. So you are not just to look at the remaining partner. Out of the remaining partners, only the solvent partner shall have to bear this loss, and that too in the proportion of capital, that is in the capital ratio. Again, there is a condition: after each partner has brought in cash equal to his share of loss. That is, before you ask them to share the capital loss arising on account of insolvency, first of all they are to bring cash equal to their share of realization loss. After that we will determine the capital loss. Then we will identify the remaining solvent partners. Remember, remaining is not just there, it is remaining solvent partners. So out of remaining partners, if someone else is also insolvent, he won't be asked to bring the money. Then the ratio will be the capital ratio. So these are the steps involved. So whenever a case of insolvency is established, then as per Garner versus Murray's ruling, we will have to take up these 1, 2, 3, 4 steps. This is a prerequisite of this condition, this case. They want that you need to bring the loss equal to in form of cash, and then only we will work for the insolvency. So first of all, solvent partners bring in cash equal to their share of loss. Step second, insolvent partner will be bringing cash as per his availability, and remaining amount will be the capital loss. Like in the last case example that we studied, B was having a 2000 rupees of deficiency, but he cannot bring that. So you will say that he will bring 500 and remaining is the loss. Now this loss will be borne by the remaining solvent partner. So suppose A and C both are solvent, so this loss will be given to A and C. Now you will establish the amount of loss. So capital loss is the amount that he cannot bring, that you can actually see in the account itself, or you can calculate it as debit balance minus the cash that he is bringing. Then identify the remaining solvent partners, calculate their capital ratio. So it is just not that the ruling is given, to tell you that the amount will be distributed like this, but in the ruling itself they had given you the procedure of calculating the capital ratio also. Now when we look at capital ratio, the capitals can be of two types. One is fixed capital, another is fluctuating capital. So this ruling has clearly stated the rules of calculating the ratio under both these cases. Now as per the ruling, if the capital is fixed, then the capital ratio will be the ratio of fixed capital. So suppose we are given a balance sheet of a company A, B, C. Suppose their capitals are 10,000, 15,000, 5,000. Okay. Then you have reserves, say 10,000. Suppose the partners are sharing profits and losses in this ratio. Okay, on the other side you have, say, loss in business, say 15,000. Drawings are there of, say, A and B, say 2,000 and 1,000. And you have current accounts, okay, of C, 4,000. And here also we have current account of, say, A and B, say 2,000 and 4,000. So this is the information given in the balance sheet. Now the question says that the losses should be distributed in the ratio of capitals. So B is insolvent. By assumption we are assuming B is insolvent and he is to bring 2,000 is his balance. He can bring 500, so we have got a capital loss. So we are continuing from there only. So as per Garner versus Murray's ruling, first of all, if any realization loss is there, partners will bring that loss. This is one requirement. Now coming to the capital loss, so the remaining partners are A and C. Since nothing is given for A and C, so we will assume both are solvent partners. So this loss will be borne by A and C in the capital ratio. Now when current accounts are given, it means that the partners are having fixed capital. So now the ratio will be the ratio of the fixed capital, that is 10,000 and 5,000. So the ratio is going to be 2:1. So this loss will be borne in 2:1 ratio. So A will get 1,000, that is 2/3, and C will bear 500. So this is how this loss will be split. So if capitals are fixed, then the capital ratio is the ratio of fixed capitals. Now second is if capitals are fluctuating, that is we are not given the current accounts. So in the same example, if I assume that these current accounts are not there, okay, so then what will happen? Now if current accounts are not given, it means the capitals are fluctuating. So in case of fluctuating capital, the capital ratio is the ratio of capital claims on the date of dissolution. So it doesn't say capital ratio. Now it says ratio of capital claim. And you know that your claims are built up of your capital plus your share in profits minus losses minus drawings. So here in the ratio of A and C's capital claim will be calculated as, we'll take up the statement, we'll make a statement to calculate their claims. So their capitals are 10,000 and 5,000. In reserves, the share of A and C, 2:1, so share and A and C is 4,000 and 2,000. In loss in business, the share will be 6,000 and 3,000. Then you have drawings also. So here in the drawings, A is having drawings, nothing for C, which implies 6,000 is A's capital and 4,000 is C's capital. So now the capital ratio, that is ratio of capital claim, is 6:4 or 3:2. So now the same loss of 1500 will be distributed as 3/5 and 2/5. So 3/5 will be taken up by A, 900, and C will bear 600. So this is how the capital losses are adjusted. Okay, so when the capital is fixed, we can directly pick the ratio from the capital balance. It's the ratio of capital balance. But if the capitals are fluctuating, then the ratio is the ratio of capital claim. So you will have to look at everything given in the balance sheet. Okay, and all this thing will be adjusted in the calculation of capital ratio. But it just says capital claim on the date of dissolution, which means if anything is happening afterwards, okay, after the date of dissolution, if any change is happening, then we will not consider that. So we'll simply consider the information given here. Beyond that, you have realization loss, you may have a partner taking over any asset, isn't it? But we won't consider that. So it is the claim on the date of dissolution. So you will just look at the balance sheet, and from the balance sheet you will calculate their claim and the ratio will be calculated. Now once we have calculated the ratio, question is how to give this loss. What will be the journal entry? Since A and C, that is the remaining partners, are bearing this loss, so when we give loss to the partners, their accounts are debited, their claim reduces. So remaining partners' accounts will be debited. That is, A and C's account will be debited, and B, insolvent partner's account, will be credited. So in his capital account of B, you see, let us say for all the three partners, not only B, A, B and C. Say for all partners. So what we are saying is, B can bring only 500, so we will say B brings in 500. Now remaining 1500, that is the capital loss. Now in this case it will be adjusted in the accounts of A and C. So B's account will stand closed. In account of A and C, it will be, they will get loss from B's account. So this is how this entry will be posted. Alright, so let us see it in fair. So the old position was that this was the status. B was to bring 2000, he cannot bring full amount. Okay, so in the present scenario, what will happen as per Garner versus Murray's ruling? First of all, you will ask him to bring make up for this loss on realization. This is just a condition which we need to fulfill. So you will ask these partners, that is A and C, who are bearing the loss. So they will be asked to bring the realization loss in cash. Now you will calculate the amount of capital loss. Since B can bring 500, his capital loss will be 1500. Okay, so B will bring in 500 cash brought in. Now this loss will be shared by remaining partners. So A's capital account, C's capital account, 900, 600, and herein you will adjust it that they are getting loss from B's capital account, and this will be then settled. Now you will calculate the accounts. Now you see, you might be finding that the debit and credit totals are not matching. The reason is that I haven't filled up this information. Okay, so I have just taken the relevant part only for your understanding. So this is how Garner versus Murray's ruling will be working. So remember one thing, that this ruling or the adjustment for insolvency of a partner comes into force, comes into action at the time of final settlement. So when you are working for the final settlement, then only you will be adjusting it. Before this, your question is a normal question. Okay, you will prepare realization account as it is, you will prepare capital account as it is. It is only at the last stage that we will work for insolvency, and then we will close the accounts by preparing bank account. Now when we look at the ruling, it has certain drawbacks. Number one is the ethical issue. Ethical issue is that since you are distributing this loss in capital ratio, which implies the person who has invested more capital, he will be asked to bring in more amount for the loss, isn't it? So in a way, you are putting more burden on such partners who have initially helped the firm by investing more money into the business. So this ruling is not justified, it is not fair. Another is the practical difficulty. Now practical difficulty arises when say we are preparing say capital accounts. Okay, now you are calculating capital ratio of A, B and C. Suppose you have their capital balance, I am just taking it here, say 10,000, 15,000, and say C's capital balance is 2000. Okay, and you have share in reserve, say 2000, 2000, 1000, and you had drawings. Suppose drawings were say 5000 for A and say 4000 for C. Now if we want to calculate capital ratio of A and C, as per insolvency, if suppose A and C are solvent partners, B is insolvent. Now when you are calculating the ratio, what is the ratio of capital claims? Capital claim of A is going to be 7000 and C's claim is going to be minus 1000, isn't it? So can we take a ratio of a plus and minus? Now he will be bearing the loss. Does it mean that B will be having a negative loss? Isn't it? So a negative amount cannot be used in the ratio. So again, it is casting more burden on a person, on a partner who is investing more money. So you are not fair when you follow this ruling. Okay, so there are practical difficulties. Some people are ignored because of a negative balance. There are ethical issues also. But still, since there are no other rulings, and no one has actually questioned this ruling till date, so this ruling is going on and it is to be followed if nothing else is given. However, if the partners, still there is a rule. See, if the partners foresee any such scenario, they can add a line in their partnership deed that we will not follow this ruling, or we will use a so and so ratio for the capital losses. So if the question is specifying any method, then we will follow that ratio and method. If nothing is given, then this ruling is to be followed. So I hope this working of Garner versus Murray's ruling is clear, and next time we'll be taking up a practical problem on this. So thank you for the day. Stay smiling, stay learning.